Hydrogels are like super absorbent, bio-friendly materials. So they can swell up to 10,000 times their own weight. So, just for frame of reference, for example, if you took a football sized dry hydrogel, you throw it into a jacuzzi, and you come back one day later, this football will grow to the size of the jacuzzi and absorb all the water inside of it while still retaining its physical structure. So it's essentially made of polymers, so which are zigzag structures, and essentially these zigzags are blended together, and then with the introduction of water they will begin to expand, and those zigzags will turn into straighter lines, expand to carry large amounts of water.
Welcome back to the MedTech 101 podcast. And today it's something that's not like, well, electric as we usually do when we talk about like the devices that come here working on people. But the product we're talking about today is are hydrogels, which are quite an exciting topic because there's so many applications you can use them for. And today I have Sinan Golhan, who's like a young CEO and founder of a company called Geltech, based out of California, and they're doing some really exciting stuff. They're basically cutting down the time it takes, to make a hydrogel, and hydrogels can have a variety of applications. So there's going to be a huge game changer, not only for the medtech industry, but also for pharmaceuticals, and even to a certain degree, like maybe baby cosmetics or whatever, etc. But he's here to join us today. So yeah, welcome on the podcast.
Yeah, great to be here, Rodney. I appreciate you taking me on.
Nice, thank you very much. I'm honored to have you here today, because I think what you're working on is one of the it's quite unique to MedTech 101, because usually we tend to have things with like an electric board and stuff, but you guys actually have both, because you got the device which we're going to be talking about today that speeds up time, but then you also have the hydrogels, which also could be classified as a medical device, because sometimes they can carry sort of like a payload, deliver it to a certain part of the body, etc. But before we even get started talking about that, we'll probably start off by talking about your background. Like, what could you tell us about your background?
Yeah, so I'm from Istanbul in Turkey, and when I was 18 years old, I got into UC San Diego nano engineering program, and I was really excited to learn about nanomedicine and drug delivery. And then, as my mom was taking me to the airport, she told me she had cancer. So when I came to college, I knew I had to focus on this, working on solutions. So I worked in various labs at in San Diego. I worked at an enterprise European company called Acıbadem, and eventually worked my way up to Harvard Medical School. And all of my research revolved around making cancer treatments more targeted. So traditionally, 99% of a chemotherapy drug will target your healthy cells. Only 1% of it targets the tumor. So we were working on materials called hydrogels that you mentioned that make cancer treatments more targeted by localizing them and targeting them to specific regions of the body. And essentially during this work, I grew pretty frustrated with the amount of manual work required. It costs around $1 billion in 10 years for a company to take an idea to market in this space. And I got caught in that cycle, just doing the same repetitive tests nonstop. Felt like we were making no progress. So decided to build a robot that automates these processes. So a robot specifically for the hydrogel industry that automates testing for hydrogels. And yeah, it's been about a year and a half since we started this company. We've been able to file 2 patents, raise around 600,000, and we're looking to get our product to the market by the end of the year.
Nice, nice. That's really great. I'm sorry to hear about your mom. Did she recover, or did she
Yeah,
did she get better?
she is still fighting. Yeah.
Okay, she's still fine. That's good. That's good. And I'm happy to hear that at least you managed to use that as fuel to create essentially your own contribution to the world. And I think when factors like that happen, you end up being more driven to do something. It's not just about the money. It's because of the the symbolism behind it, and I think it shows as well to because it's not that easy to start a company out straight out of uni, and you guys have been able to do that. So I'm quite happy to hear that and filed two patents, and you got an MVP, which is like a market viable product coming up soon as well. So um, just to then get started, then in terms of like the journey leading to Geltech. Before we even talk about that, like how would you describe like what a hydrogel is to people? Someone who's never heard of it. How would you describe it in a layman terms?
Yeah, that's a great question. So hydrogels are like super absorbent, bio-friendly materials. So they can swell up to 10,000 times their own weight. So just for frame of reference, for example, if you took a football-sized dry hydrogel, you throw it into a jacuzzi, and you come back one day later, this football will grow to the size of the jacuzzi and absorb all the water inside of it while still retaining its physical structure. So it's essentially made of polymers, so which are zigzag structures, and essentially these zigzags are blended together, and then with the introduction of water they will begin to expand, and those zigzags will turn into straighter lines, expand to carry large amounts of water. um, so similar to our own tissue that makes up natural material, they are mostly made up of water, which makes them the next best thing to real biological tissue, which is why they're used in, all these drug delivery applications treating cancer, arthritis, diabetes. They're used in wound care, essentially as a second skin, providing essentially a great environment, a moist environment. They're used in every single diaper, almost every single contact lens. They're used in tons of cosmetics, all the hyaluronic acid, this and that. They're used in implants. For example, if you make hydrogels really dense, they are used in essentially hip replacements, knee replacements. Very solid as well, depending on how you tune them.
Definitely, and I think one thing that's well, the most exciting applications of hydrogels that I saw was for wound care. For example, how like hydrogels can be used as like to cover a wound and then like have this like slow release of medicine into the wound, which is much better than maybe other forms of traditional medicines that are used, and it can create much more results from that. And because of that, obviously it's and one thing as well, some of them can be bio how do you call it, it's basically when like some sutures materials that can be in contact with the human body or even inside the body that will dissolve by themselves over time. So then there's no need for the
Biodegradable.
doctor biodegradable, exactly. And but in a way that it's also biocompatible with the body. So it's and that's the nice thing about hydrogels, right? That's the application, because then you don't have to go for a second surgery to remove stitches or whatever it is. It can be when put in the right place with this with the surgeon, or it can really be like the future of medicine, right? And like I know one thing you mentioned when you're talking about this was like in the past used to take long. Could you please just go through the process of telling us how it was in the past and how you guys are kind of solving that challenge? Because you did mention that you're basically working to make the hydrogels much faster.
Yes. So we're working on essentially expediting R&D and quality control for hydrogels. And the past you're talking about is actually the present. And it will be the future unless we
Yes.
intervene, right? So this is the current status quo, essentially for testing hydrogels. Um, for a lot of these products we're talking about, hydrogels are used in the body for you put them in the body for weeks at a time. So scientists like me in the laboratory, I have to simulate how the hydrogel will behave in the body in the laboratory for weeks at a time, right? Through the ex vivo testing in the laboratory takes a very long time. So if I'm trying to optimize a formulation, I'm trying to tweak it, I'm trying to make it perfect, I'm trying to see how it's going to work with a different drug incorporated, I have to test batches for weeks at a time. So you can kind of understand how time consuming that is. It means I have to come into the labs at weird hours. I have to come in on the weekend just to check on the sample. I can't test it overnight. There's all these problems with this. And the thing is that when it's in the body, it doesn't care how often you check on it. It's just going to behave how it behaves 24/7. So uh, essentially, now we have an instrument that provides that 24/7 testing and can test six hydrogels simultaneously. Um,
Nice. And I think just to even put this into perspective, for most people who've never done lab work, I think the other side of biomedical engineering is basically working with sort of like cells, like in these labs, and the process of going into the lab is not the same way you do wearing like your normal clothes. You have to go through like a clean room, wear your coats in a certain way, and then you got this sort of like laminar flow, like laminar airflow cabinets that make sure that no like germs go through that, because you just don't want your hydrogel to get contaminated. So there's a lot of work that goes in. It's not just simply walking in and out of an office. I remember during my days in university having to dress up and going into like the lab, and it was something that took at least a couple of minutes, maybe 20 minutes or so, just in and out of it. And that's what you're trying to solve and basically make it a much better process, basically. And I
yeah,
just wanted to do that to paint a picture for people to really understand the struggle of what you mean when you say this is what's really kind of what's the problem. And that's what you guys are working to do. And and like the machine you spoke of, like, could you please give us a run through in terms of like what makes it so special in this regard?
so our device is essentially it's like a big box that looks like a printer. And essentially, what it does is it will increase your throughput sevenfold.
Wow.
So within a 1 week span, it can do seven times the tests that one human can. It also cuts the cost of testing down tenfold. So using our instrument is 10 times cheaper than using a manual laborer. And it also makes testing five times more repeatable because we keep our samples in controlled incubation chambers throughout testing. With
Yes.
manual testing, they have to remove the material from the chamber and take it to individual instruments to test the material. So
Wow.
we completely automate the process so there's no manual intervention and the material
Wow.
stays inside the chamber throughout testing.
Nice. That's really exciting to hear. And could you please give us, like a rundown of like what kind of materials can be, looked at with this machine? Like, is it specific to certain kind of gels? Or is it like, are you guys, or is it, or do all materials work in there? Like, what's the range of materials that work inside?
Great question. So theoretically, there you could throw just about any material you wanted in there. Um, you could throw bread, you could throw fabrics, you could throw metals, you could throw anything in there, but the properties that the materials tell us about, which is swelling, how the material expands, degradation, like biodegradability, how it breaks apart, mechanical testing, like the stiffness of the material, and then pH and temperature responses. These are what the hydrogel scientists will care about. So technically, you can put in, powders, other kind of bulk materials, films, any type of material you could think of into the device. But it's really going to be useful to the hydrogel scientists. And hydrogels come in all these different forms, like they can be powder form, they can be disc form, they can be amorphous, they can be thin films. But our device can accommodate for all of them. Yeah.
Nice, nice. That's good. And one of the things as well, hydrogels do come in form of is sometimes it can be used as a capsule, then that can be swallowed and then sort of like release the payload, like somewhere later in the body, in the digestive system, to be more targeted. So the question is for people like if someone's listening from a pharmaceutical background, trying to integrate this into their technology, like does the hydrogel also then do the filling process of those capsules within the chamber? How would you, is it something that's possible, or is it something that would have to be done externally? And by that I mean, the capsules that are like liquid filled, is it something that the machine can do, or is it something that would have to be done outside the machine as well?
So the machine can essentially tell you how that capsule is breaking apart. And if there is any release from that capsule, it can auto sample from that chamber, which essentially auto samples into a different well plate. it's kind of getting a bit in depth here, but essentially, yes, we can measure how these capsules are expanding or breaking apart, and then we can automate the process of sample collection for measuring the drug delivery, drug release.
All right, nice. And I'm really happy to hear that because it's actually quite cool. Because most of the time when people have to do these things, they either do it through some sort of stimulation or some sort of like checking of certain information and stuff like that. But having said that, the question is though, like in your journey, like over this time when you've been basically running Geotech, what do you think the biggest hurdles have been for you guys? And is it like, is there any stigmas? Are there any sort of like, some like resistance that you're facing? Like, and what would those be?
Yeah, raising money was not easy, and it
Yes.
definitely is not easy moving forward. Business management and operations, all of that stuff is quite. Um, I it's a bit boring if you ask me, and it's not very engaging, but it's very important and needs to be set up. So I think that was definitely a challenge for me to kind of get out of engineering and scientist mindset into a more business oriented mindset. That's definitely that's definitely been a big part of it. But also putting together a good team has been another hurdle. But I think right now, team wise, we're good. But those are the main hurdles. Yeah.
True, definitely. I just want to elaborate further on that point because like raising money is, I think, the fear for most young people from starting companies. And like, I think you having started Geotech relatively straight after university, I'm sure there's a lot of people right now who probably don't want to go work for other people, but they've got good ideas and they want to, start their own companies. What would you tell them in terms of like raising money? Because obviously there's different forms of raising capital. Like in MedTech, there's, you can go to venture capitalists, you can go to family offices, you can go to friends and family. If you have family members that are that generous enough, you can go to like like sort of like public funds, etc. How would you say is the best way you guys have been able to raise money? Like, and this is obviously from the money you've raised. And if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, you raised about $500,000 so far to date, right? Or
Yeah. So it's I can tell you kind of my journey through this. I'm not sure if I have like a formula or anything. Mine just kind of involves looking
yeah.
at every possible avenue and just always be ready to pitch your idea effectively
Mhm.
at any point. So for me, as soon as I graduated college, I won a pitch competition at UCSD, and that got us an interview for a grant, and then we got that grant, so we got 100,000 to start off our company. At that point, it was just me and the company. And then I spent probably around 6 to 7 months raising money and nothing. I didn't get any money whatsoever. It was just probably from April April
Yes.
24 to
Yeah.
yeah, December 24. I was
Mhm.
I was just trying to raise money. I was pitching everywhere, trying to get my deck better.
True.
Nobody, yeah, pitched to family members, pitched to this person, that person, nothing. And then my grandpa wrote me maybe like a 10K check or something. He was like, "Oh,
Nice.
good job," and then wrote me a 10K check. And I was getting pretty broke. I sold my car, all this
Wow.
stuff, and then I was just on some random pitching Zoom call event, right? Like biotech pitching something. And then after the event, this guy emails me. He's like, "Hey, like I'm out in Boston and I have some connections at MIT. I think I have some people that are interested." It's like, "Yeah, we talked to him." And then after a few calls, he says, "Yeah, okay, I'll lead you around and I'm in for 100K." Just out of
Wow.
nowhere. I didn't even meet him in person. I hadn't met him yet in person. And I guess this was what, around January? Yeah, January this year. And then I just went back to everyone else I had spoken to, maybe the 50, 100 people. And I started saying, "Hey, look, we got our lead investor, we got 100K, and like we're on our way to close." And like slowly started building it up. And then within about 6 weeks, actually, we got from the 10K check my grandpa wrote to all the way up to around, I think, 350,000. Um, so I think yeah, we got like 5 or 6 more investors just from that initial person.
Crazy,
And
crazy.
then yeah, I went to a it's gonna sound random, but I went to a yoga class. Okay, I don't, I love yoga. I don't do it that often. I went to one yoga class. Okay, and it was pretty early morning, like 7 a.m. something on a Saturday, and then there was this investment banker guy there. He was like retired, and he asked me what I do. I told him about the company. He said, "Do you accept checks?" I said, "Yes, we accept checks." And then he said, "Okay, come to my office tomorrow." And I went to his office. He brought his friend with him, and then they were both interested. I said, "Okay, come again in 2 days." They brought a few more friends, and one of them was a polymer chemistry professor, so at Imperial College London,
Well,
and um, yeah, she kind of looked, and she worked with hydrogels during her PhD work, so she was like pretty excited and kind of gave these other finance people like a rundown of the technical side of things, and because their friend was involved in this, they became more excited about it. And
well,
then I think after that, they created like this WhatsApp group with 12 friends, and then seven of them invested in the company, which got us to 500K after
well.
that. So it's kind
That's
of network
amazing.
effect. I didn't even meet some of these investors in that friend group. They were just investing because their friends invested.
Nice.
And
And would you say after this sort of like seed round or like sort of like pre-seed round,
mhm.
did you lose any equity? Is that part of the process,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
like did you retain a lot of it?
yeah. We did.
Okay.
Gave it. It was investments, so we gave it on
Yeah.
safe notes.
Yes.
So everyone has their own process, and like I think
Hmm.
one thing I can say is that the money will come when you least expect it, and
Yes.
like you just have to have like a lot of almost blind faith. Like my family was very concerned. They're like, you're working on this company, you don't have any money, like how long can you do this? You're not making any money. um I'm like, you're right, but like I believe in this, so I'm just gonna keep working on it. Like that's all I can really give. I don't know if there's a specific strategy. I have just It's like a
Nice.
full-time job, right? It's like looking for a job on crack
Mm.
almost, like just insanely. um yeah, that's what I got for fundraising.
Oh, that's really amazing. If anything, it what it preaches to people is that just keep going. And sometimes with most people, once you get one good investor, like we like you knock 1,000 doors, and maybe one door that opens leads to so many things, because you only need one yes to really get it launched. But once you get that one person, then it becomes sort of like a bandwagon effect, right? It's so
Yeah.
hard to build the 100K, but the other 400K that came after was not as difficult to get the first 10K or something like that. So it's quite exciting to see that, and it's quite encouraging. And obviously, like, one, like, since we're getting towards the end of this episode, like, um is like the traditional question that's on MedTech 101 podcast is, because what you really said for some people sounds futuristic, right? It's like, oh, wait a second, are we really there? So the question is, with looking at what you have, which is like some of the latest technology in the market, what would you say is, the future, of like, well, what would you say is the current versus the future of, like, the medtech industry when it comes to hydrogels? Do you think it's going to be something that people can 3D print at home, or is it something people can easily make, or is it, and what opportunities is it going to open? And with this question, feel free to go as science fiction as you want. It's like an open-ended question, just to indulge, people listening.
Yeah, that's a great question. And hydrogels are such a broad field, but as you know, for example, when you say printing, everything that is bioprinted is printed using hydrogels. Everything you print, you'd either put it inside of a hydrogel or you directly print a hydrogel. So I think we could see a future where people are printing, organs, skin, any type of electronic embedded in hydrogels, and they can have a bioprinter at home that can build those types of tools for them. You could print contact lenses at home. You could print, skincare, cosmetic products at home, bandages at home. Uh, that could be a very interesting future. We're also seeing, bioprinted organs, things like that, that are printed using hydrogels. So that's another exciting future as well, I would say.
Nice, nice. Now that's really exciting, and definitely, and for your products, I'm gonna be also just putting the link below for people to find it and to get hold of you and see what it has to offer. And because I think it's quite exciting, and it looks quite cool. It looks like a chunky lab machine, but if it's for the lab, it's gonna look like a med lab machine. And yeah, guys, like check out the description below for more details, more PowerPoints, because there's other things that I've put on the video format of this in case you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcast. If you want to see more graphics, go over to the YouTube. But again, below the description on all platforms, you see the links leading up to Geltech. But so yeah, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rodney.